Good morning. So we are here in 1.3.16 again. This time I wanted to actually take a look at the European content that they were supposed to put into the patch. I really haven't gone through and done any actual flights yet, simply because, well, I've been dealing with some other situations that have made that a little bit difficult. And I've had to go through and do a lot of resetting of a lot of game options and everything because the issues that I experienced with Windows 10 chomping through my Windows 7 build. Now, all right, let's get over to the UK. Okay. Now this is UK and Ireland, which is over there. Be interesting to do some flights around the up northern areas in Scotland and Wales, but for the moment, as a place I have flown previously, I want to shoot down the Thames, which is basically take off from Heathrow and go this way, and you'll get to London City Airport and all that stuff and head out. So that is essentially my plan. Wow, there is zero detail of what's out here. So we are going to just start here on the runway. Very simple flight, nothing fancy. I am just going to check you real quick to see if you copied any of the liveries. Nope, you didn't. Great. So the 5 gig livery update that I downloaded, 4.5 gig, whatever it was, and put in the correct folder does not apply. So still cheesed off at the way that they make you handle and deal with copying custom content into the game, because whatever. All my original complaints about that are still there. Load times seem to have been all over the place with this patch as well. I've had a few load times that just zipped right through and came in, and then a couple others that for no reason just seem to take forever. And based on where it's stopping here, I have a feeling this one's going to take a while. So we'll be back when this thing loads in. Okay, jeez. That was a good 10 minutes of delay just to get the stinking game to load, and now I'm sitting here on the Heathrow runway at 9 FPS. What the heck? It's like GTA quality, or GTA Online quality of garbage load times. And recently they figured out mostly what's causing the GTA load times is poor coding. So why am I spending 10 to 15 minutes trying to load in here when you can stream 90% of the data to my computer while I'm doing my pre-flight checks? Now I'm up to 18, 19 FPS, which is slightly normal, but you can see how choppy a simple pan to the left and right is. It really... Ooh, 16 FPS. Wow. It's like I'm in LAX again. Look at my floor and I immediately go up. Yay! And further highlight, let's check my task manager. Flight Simulator is currently using 0.1% to 0 of my GPU. It's using 18 gigs of memory out of 32 available. Steam is using more of my GPU than Flight Simulator right now. So, why? Alright, let's take off. We're in a Grand Caravan. We're going to have a nice look-see at how everything is up ahead. Now, before I take off, whoa, let's get this set up here. I want to have altitude hold on. I don't want to be up too high because I want to see the buildings and the river, so we're going to go there. I'm going to kick on vertical speed fairly early. Nice simple 1,000 feet per minute, I believe it is. I don't have anything really set on that, so we're just going to do a straight out flight to the east. And let me bring the nav map over so I don't have to pan on that little one. So essentially we're just going to fly straight out, pick up the Thames around here, and then just kind of fly along it past downtown London, all that good stuff, and then we'll sort of follow it out. London City Airport's over there somewhere. And we'll fly out of it. I'm not sure how long that will take, but yeah, there's London City Airport. It should be pretty good, I think. Specifically to look at the new buildings and textures. I did fly out of Heathrow before, a couple of times, doing a short flight to France in the TBM. And overall, I don't see a lot of difference here at the airport. It's probably some better signage. I know one of the things they tried to do was make these taxiway signs actually something that you can read from the cockpit, as before it was virtually impossible. And I will say I can actually read them now. Let's get this thing throttled up and rolling. Okay. Counter the little bit of torque steer. We should get up, there it is. Should be kind of lifting off on our own here in a minute. Autopilot. There you go. Bring me back around. You can see the downtown buildings out there in the distance. Very good, very good. Alright, airport. I really don't see that much of a difference in the way it looks. Rest of the city, though, I think there has been a definite improvement. It's been a while since I did my last flight, but the building textures look a lot more consistent. Oh, an A380 down there, I would assume. Can't quite tell, but that certainly looks like the A380. Alright, so airplane's flying well. Let's raise the flaps. We are pretty much at... we are not at altitude, so I don't quite know why the plane dipped just by lowering the flaps so much. Looks like a stadium over there, that's kind of cool. Funky building. Alright, so let's see where we're headed. So I think I need to make a slight course correction to the left. Not much, but there's the Thames, yep. Alright, I think that'll get me on track with where I want to go. Okay, let's pull the throttles back now. So currently, we're pulling down 16, 17 FPS sitting outside the airplane. There is a slight wind, but the plane's handling fairly well. Okay, now that we've leveled off, throttle back to 70%, I think it is. Okay. And the trees look a lot better. Ooh, that seems to drop me into the 14 FPS. Brutal. Okay, now we're gonna get to the big stuff, which is likely gonna drop me even lower on FPS. And keep in mind on that I am playing at a 5+K resolution, 5760 by 1200. But again, I've been comparing this since the day it came out. Ooh, 10 FPS. You can see the chop now. Water looks pretty good. 9 FPS. Ooh, this is going to be bad. See, when I first got the game, I left most of the settings at default, seeing how the game would perform. I made a couple minor tweaks to some things, and I have not gone back in to make those minor tweaks, as I mentioned at the start of this, so I will likely need to go back in and do a little bit of those adjustments to, I think, shaders and reflections to a degree, as I think that's primarily what's chomping me now at 8 to 10 FPS. It's like a slideshow. And I don't know if it's going to be wise to do all of that right now while I'm flying in-game where I'll have to recompute everything. I will say the Thames looks a lot better. You can see the dirty, murky texture of the nasty water. Looks a lot better. All the different bridges are much better textured. The buildings aren't as bland or generic now. They look a lot better. And the city itself looks a heck of a lot more filled out and detailed. So I think this, at least for this big city, it looks a lot better. Kind of like going over New York after they did that update. 7 FPS now. Ooh, that's quite the cool construction around the old power plant. At least it looks like construction. Maybe it's destruction. 6 FPS. Wow. Okay, let's look up the sky. Immediate jump to 22 FPS. So yeah, this is not really GPU load in my opinion. Let me pull up the resources. So my GPU is currently being used at 44%. Yeah, CPU is only being used at 60 to 70% really, which is a little odd. And I'm at 23 gigs of RAM. There we go, finally a spike on CPU. 100%, finally. So I think part of what's happening is that I've known for a while that I'm a little bit CPU bound in some of these games like Flight Simulator, where it's got so much information to try and stream down that the GPU is not my bottleneck. See the Shard and some of the other office buildings. That's pretty neat from here. And it looks like the main terminal. So I'm definitely CPU bound on a lot of this stuff, but some of the changes that I had made really seemed to help. So I need to go back through some of those settings. And I'd like to do another flight a little closer to the city and fly down the river, but with this garbage FPS, there's just no way that I could pull that off. Now, as soon as we're out of the main downtown area now, we're up to 13 to 16 FPS again, and you can see the difference massively on the screen. As we come over the main, I think, that's the main downtown, but is this financial? I don't remember. I don't know London that well. And Millennium Dome, City Airport. And that's pretty much the end of the tour. I will say that this, similar to New York, the texture updates, at least here in the main city, fabulously done. This looks really, really good, especially the river. The whole thing just looks fantastic. I feel kind of like I am sitting in a mapping program, especially in VR, because with like Google Maps VR, it's really Google Earth VR, it's really fun to kind of go walking around the city quite literally. And it gives you a view or a feeling very similar to what we have now in Flight Simulator. Alright, so I'm coming over London City Airport now. I'm going to call that the end of that. But what I want to do is have a quick look at some of the video settings, because that's pretty terrible. So you can see everything's pretty much tapped out. I will happily turn VSync off. 60 is the best my monitors could do at 60 hertz, but I don't care about that. Terrain level of detail. I do want the high terrain. Let's try dropping you down to high. I like that. Trees I think I can drop to high. Grass and bushes I think we can do medium on. Typically, because I'm not low enough to really see that. I like objects, volumetric clouds. Yep, I like that, but we can drop that down. Textures up. Let's drop you down to 4x4. Texture synthesis. I don't remember what that one is. I think we want to keep that high. Water waves. I haven't actually seen any water waves. Drop you down to little one. Texture shadows down. Didn't I just turn you down one? Yeah. Contact shadows. Let's drop a lot of that down. Windshield effects. Let's drop you down to high. I think turn you down to high as well. Reflections down to high. Light shafts to high. Bloom I want. Depth of field, I definitely want to be able to see that. Let's turn that down 1. Alright, let's apply this and see what that does. It's going to take it a minute, so... Alright, I don't think there's anything else really important to look at, so let's go back into the game now. No major changes here, actually, if I must be honest, similar to what I thought, because I changed it in-game. We're still at 15 FPS, which really does me no good. So what I'm going to do now is turn my heading hard left, and we're just going to fly right back to Heathrow, really. I'm at 18 FPS right now. Okay, come on, banking left, and we're gonna head back a little past west to bring us back in. So you can see some of the glare on the windshield, unless that's, yeah, that's scratching and scuffing on the windshield as we fly through the clouds. That's pretty dang sweet. Okay, what I want to do is kind of loop down around to go back over the Thames again. 15, 13 FPS, 14. Okay, there we are, leveling off. Okay, we're just going to do kind of the same thing. We're at 13 FPS. 12 FPS, 14. Put the bulk of the city back in. Still at 15. Once we hit the Millennium Dome, we should really start seeing the chop kick in again. You can already see some of the stuttering effects as the display stops. 11 FPS right as we got to the Millennium Dome. 14, 12. 14, 13, 12. Now we're hitting the slideshow. There's 10, 11. So that again shows, because everything that I really turned down was more GPU processing effects. And now we're at 10 and 9. You can really see that stutter kicking in. So again, it's not GPU limitations that are really killing me at this point, because everything I dumped was GPU bound. And right now, according to Windows Task Manager, the game is using 2% of my GPU's available resources. CPU, we're at 43%. 22% is going to my recording software, which, sure, whatever, not that big of a deal. So I still have CPU cycles to spare, but for some reason the game doesn't want to utilize them regularly to improve performance. Now I will say, right now we're flying a little closer and we are at 11 to 12 FPS, so I did gain a little bit by it not having to do quite as much. 10, 11, 10, 12, back to 11. So here we were coming through here at about 6 FPS. So I did essentially double my FPS, but by cutting down most of those settings to half, we didn't really see a drastic improvement in performance. I will say we did see some improvement, I'm not going to lie, but we didn't get quite as much as one would have thought. So, whoops, wrong button. While we're still here in the city, let's come back in here. Even this is loading chuggy now. Let's come back in here. Let's do DLAA. That should help a lot. Let's put terrain. I want you at 180. Objects at 180. I thought was another slider. You were at 16x, you're down. Texture resolution, let's drop you to high now. Apply that. This should give me another couple FPS, I would expect. I didn't do a massive drop on the texture resolution because really I want to see these things beautifully. I want to feel like I'm immersed and I'm there. And on the edges of some of the buildings now you can start seeing some pixelation. Though now that I'm paused, I am seeing some cars driving through the city, which is really flipping cool. Down here, you couldn't see them before, so we're still at 10 FPS, so I don't think I really gained anything. But what I will say now is... Wow, that's bad. Okay, I'm going to slew the image to my right monitor so you can kind of see out of the edges here, and my left one. Oh. Before, everything looked really smooth and spectacular, and well, you'll have to excuse some of the stretching. That's just the way Infinity and NV Surround stretch the image. I look at the central monitor, and the corner of your eyes do kind of a natural stretch, and your brain recomputes everything to make it look normal. And that's what happens in the game like this. So this stretch is just the game trying to display that. But if you look at the quality, you can see the buildings look like crap now. And on the left... This is that power plant that was under construction or destruction, whatever the heck it is, and it looks like garbage. And you can see the trees just look like garbage, and you can see the pixelation on the river now. So that's why I don't like making that particular change, because now everything just looks like poo. So I'm going to put all that stuff back out. Vector data doesn't matter. And that's even with building textures at ultra. The visual quality of the buildings is supposed to be at ultra, and it looks like that. So let's try this. Oops, where's my other slider? Let's put that back up to high. I think we can drop volumetric clouds to medium. I think that's where I had it before. And I think I wanted to mess with something else. Okay, render resolution is a difficult one to mess with. You really don't want to mess with this too much, but basically you're screwing with the resolution that the textures are being rendered at. So if you take this away from your actual screen resolution, then you can kind of make things look terrible without actually dropping the resolution. It can help, so if I drop that down 1, you can see I'm still at essentially a 4K resolution, but I'm displaying everything there, so it's kind of this weird super sampling, upscaling type mess, and it can help, but it's not quite what I really want to do. So what I'm going to do is drop the buildings down 1 now, and see kind of how that looks. And it doesn't look like it's re-rendered everything yet. Okay, so some of my buildings re-rendered here. I saw them flash, and you can see over here some of these buildings re-rendered. They look a little sharper, a little crisper now. They're still not rendered in because I'm not over them. Same on the other side, but let's see what happens when we go back to the game. 8 FPS, 9, 8, 7. Oof. No real benefit for dropping all that down there. So, the last thing that I will try. And again, everything's a mix. So the building textures still look pretty good. So I think I'm okay to leave the building textures on high. What I want to do is drop this one down 1 to 90. Let's go down 2. Let's go down here to this one that I had pointed out. And let's see what this does. Ooh, that blanked everything out because now it's got to re-render it all. Now I can see on these side monitors kind of the drop in overall quality, but let's get back in game for a minute. Now we're at 15 FPS, so see that 11 looking back. Let's manually do a right turn and head back east before we go to land. And do another pass. Oof, look at those buildings out of my cockpit. See, that is why I don't like doing this. Even on their loading screen, their screenshot looked like crap. Some of these buildings render fine. Others just look like hot garbage. Look at this. Oh, well, you can't. Hang on. Oof. Some of those buildings just don't look good at all. Oh, wait, crap. No, I hit the wrong button. Keep turning, keep turning, keep turning. Where are you going, airplane? There we go. Okay, FPS is starting to chug again. Alright, this should get us over the building, so this will probably be a lot worse than it otherwise was, but... Alright, let's look back ahead. Well, I'm sitting at 17, 19 FPS as we start to bring the rest of everything into view. We're going to fly kind of over it, unfortunately. I did set myself to turn a bit harder to the right. Let's pull out of the plane. You can see it still looks decent, but there's some more issues and angular artifacting on some of these buildings. I know some of it's actual crap on the roof, but it just doesn't look as crisp or as clean as it did the first time I was flying over. Even with the garbage slideshow, it just doesn't look as nice. So if we look at BT Tower here, see these buildings that aren't buildings? Oh, it's harder to see if I don't zoom in, but my eyes, staring at my monitor here, can really pick out a lot of those details. And it kills a lot of the immersion. Now I am sitting at 16, 17 FPS at this point where I was at 10 to 12. So dropping the render resolution, exactly as I said, did give me the biggest jump in performance. We're still at 14, 15 FPS. But it also really impacted the visual quality. Now I could potentially offset that by lowering everything else, but again, I don't like looking out over the world where I can see these distances and it looks garbage. And that's kind of where I think the performance of the game, pulling all this stuff in, because when I load the game, 17, 18 FPS, so we got a huge improvement in performance with that, and I'm going to leave it at that. But when we load the game, it takes 10 to 15 minutes sometimes for it to load. What is it loading? Is it loading all these buildings and linking all these textures? If so, there's got to be a better way to do it. And second, I'm at an airport, so load the airport, load the immediate surrounding of the airport, and as soon as that's done, start streaming in the data you need to populate the rest of this area. So, oops, I keep hitting the wrong one. Let's take a look at that. General, let's come down here to data. Data. So current data consumption, I've used 1.64 gigs. Data limitation, I don't have any. I've got unlimited bandwidth. So a rolling cache allows me to basically store a bunch of stuff on my hard drive. I've given it 20 gigs worth of real live area textures to store. I highly doubt just flying around London here is going to fill up 20 gigs. And again, I have 120 megabits in each direction, which is best case scenario. So it should be able to relatively quickly, when I load into Heathrow, download into the background and cache all these textures for all these buildings and everything that I'm looking at and kind of get everything ready for me so that when I fly into this area, it's just pulling the cache off of the drive. And this is an SSD that I've got this on, so I'm not hurting for cycles on the drive or spinning platters and magnetic heads to move around. So that's really what kind of kills me on the performance here. What is causing it to have such a hard time pulling all these in together? I know I don't have the most modern CPU. I have a 5820K. It's currently, not underclocked, but I was running at 4.6 gigahertz on the overclock till my motherboard started having issues. Now I'm running at 3.6 to 3.8 gigahertz depending on the day. Right now I think I'm at 3.8. That's still not bad because it's 6 physical cores with 6 hyper threads. And if I pull up Task Manager and look at it, it won't capture for you right now, but I'm showing 60%, 50 to 60% CPU utilization, 72% memory utilization, and 18% GPU utilization. If I sort by CPU, Flight Sim's currently using 24% of my CPU. My recording software is using 20%. So, really, memory, 74% used, so I have plenty to spare right now. And Flight Simulator is only using 16 gigs with the game being paused. So when I unpause, that'll probably jump up to another 20, 30. So yeah, there may be some memory limitations. GPU, Steam's client web helper is using 12 to 15% of my GPU, which is basically if I shift tab and load the Steam menus and everything in the background. That is using more of my GPU than Flight Simulator. Desktop window manager, 6%. Flight Simulator is the 4th to 5th highest CPU or GPU utilization at 0.1%. Now let's unpause and see what happens with that. Flight Simulator is now using 0.1% of my GPU. Now, I'm sure aspects of the way Windows is reading that is not going to be 100% accurate, but still, I play most games, Call of Duty, FPS, even Star Citizen, and I will see my GPU and CPU utilization skyrocket depending on what the limitations of the game are and what's actually causing my impact. So with this game, I still think I'm CPU bound and limited just in how fast it can crunch and pull stuff in. I think some of it's game optimization issues. And I'm sure to a large degree, a big chunk of that is my GPU that is limiting aspects of what I'm doing. But as we saw, when I made the changes to anti-aliasing and things like that, that didn't give me the best performance improvement out of everything else that I did. Simply dropping the resolution down for the textures gave me a better improvement on everything else. So keep hitting the wrong stinking button. Just some food for thought when you're trying to set this game up or tweak with your settings. Now, I love the way things look. I love being able to look out the window and see cars, and I'd love to be able to put more cars in there, but I know that's going to put more load on my already pretty tapped out CPU, and that's not what I want to do. At least not right now. All right, I think I'm almost in the pattern here, so let's head west a little more, because that's Heathrow out there. And I need to be heading into the airport. I don't know if I'm exactly lined up, but I think we're pretty good to at least make an approach. We'll at least get close enough so I can find the runway. Okay, good enough, good enough. All right, let's go back out. Now we're farther away from everything now, so 14, 15 FPS. You can see it's a lot smoother. There's not as much chop. If I look the other way, we're at 18, 19. Well, we're still dropping a bit because it's loading all the other stuff below me. But we're far enough away that it's not as bad as it once was. I think I might actually be too far south. I think the runway is right there. Okay, let's throttle down a little bit. So I don't like having to drop the texture resolution down, and I didn't have to do that in the first run up to the patch that kind of broke VR and everything. So I am disappointed to that end, but if it at least gives me enough good performance to be able to play more normally at this point, then it is what it is, and that's just what I'll have to do. Can't see, those don't look like Pappy lights, but these look like taxiway runways. I'm just going to fly that direction for the moment. Pretty sure I'm pointed at a runway, or at least there's a runway somewhere up there. And there's a guy in a 787, I think, off to my right. That's pretty nifty as he turned into the flight plan. There he is. Okay, let's start getting set up here. So altitude, let's go down to 1,000. Golly, I cannot see these buttons. Vertical. Yep, that is definitely a runway now that I'm zoomed in, but we got to turn more to the right. Yep, now that I can really see it. First set of flaps on. Okay, let's get this thing farther over. Now we should start heading down. I am way high even for being at this distance. I'm not too bad actually. Yeah, I'm still on about his level. Decrease my descent a little bit there. Looks like I got some wind. That's an interesting bit of crabbing going on. It seems like the flight control surfaces are fighting themselves again, which is not cool. And down to 1,000, so let's just keep going down at this rate. I think we are going to need to decrease my vertical speed a little more. Get my speed going down a little more. Let's do flaps to land. That'll give me the largest drop in everything. We're going to angle down heavily. Okay, come on, come on. Heading 280 for the runways. I don't quite know why you're crabbing so hard. Alright, autopilot is off. Hello. Yes, because autopilot is broken. Okay, we're doing alright. We're going a bit fast, but we're doing alright, and we are way too high. Okay, let's bring this bird to the ground and hopefully not crash it into the ground. Okay, we can throttle down more. We're still doing about 110 knots. Getting closer. We're going to bleed off a ton of speed as soon as I start to flare this. Plane just wants to nosedive right now. There we go. Pull it up easy. Bit too much. Okay, a bit low, but we're going to flare it. And we're too high again. Yeah, I knew I was coming in too fast. I should be at 60, 70 knots for this. Not bad, not bad. Whoa, where are we going? To heck with you. I cleared myself to land. Alright, so I don't know what changed in a lot of the performance. And again, I have yet to be able to hook up my VR headset to really test how all of that works. But I will say that thus far, I'm pretty impressed with the visual look of the Europe update. I'd like to go fly around some of the mountainous north and check out Ireland and some of the other areas there that I haven't really flown around before. I came to London once or twice earlier when the first VR patch went, and it was neat, and I didn't have really that bad a performance, honestly, with the settings that I had. I think I was getting about 17 to 21 FPS, somewhere in that range in VR with the previous settings. I had a few things tweaked down. I don't think I had the resolution drop down one, but or the rendering resolution drop down. And I had pretty decent performance, and it was a lot of fun to fly around in VR. It just didn't look as good as it does now. So I will say visually, the update looks fantastic. Performance-wise, they still need to figure out what's causing some issues, and it makes me nervous still to try and figure out how VR is going to look, because as much fun as VR was, because honestly, the VR when it first came out was all I wanted to play in this, because it was so good and immersive to lean around the cockpit and feel like I'm there, and it looked fantastic. It was just a great experience. But whenever they did the last update, it just completely broke it to the point where I could not play at that low FPS. And if I'm flying around here at, what was it, 6 FPS with those stutters, when that stutters, that's usually the system locking up and there's no data. So while my monitors are displaying just fine, the headset won't refresh like that and retain the previous image. So I get a black no screen, then suddenly a flash of a screen, then no screen, flash of screen, like when I was approaching LAX, and that really hurts my head. So as I continue to get my system set up and ready to go again, I will continue to test things. Hopefully this gives you an idea of some of the performance in the European one on some older hardware. But again, I don't think my hardware is that bad that it should cause this level of performance. So I still think they've made some changes on the back end that haven't worked out as well, because even the US update didn't break things that bad. And even flying around New York in the past, I saw dips, but it was nothing like this. So, all right. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.